Well, good morning. If I could have your attention just briefly. Welcome to AUSA's Institute of Land Warfare Global Force Symposium and Exposition. My name is Michael Scanlan. I'm the Senior Director of Meetings for AUSA. General Ham is our host for this symposium. Before we get started, it is my privilege to bring forth to present the colors this morning, the Alabama A&M University ROTC, and singing the national anthem is Miss Audra Allen, Command Strategic Planner at Army Materiel Command. Would you please stand?
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. Still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free?
That was terrific, wasn't it? Let's hear it for Audra Allen. Please be seated. Before General Ham comes to the microphone, a few announcements. Your badge is our way of keeping good order in the symposium. You'll need it to get into the exhibit hall and into the session room here. If you misplace it or leave it at your hotel room, please visit the registration counter and we'll print you a new one. The proceedings, a link to the proceedings from the presentations at the symposium will be on the AUSA website next week. Video on the website under past events. Video of the presentations will also be available next week under past events. Question cards. Now there are question cards out in the foyer on the tables and also in front. I will be wandering throughout the room and I can pass them out to you, and I'll pick them up and bring them forward to the speaker. We normally have press at our symposia, so I'll set the ground rules. We are on the record and for attribution. How many of you out there are members of AUSA? Raise your hands. Wow, that's pretty good. We took a quick picture, and we know the ones who did not raise their hands. So we're coming for you. Please, we're a membership organization. We can't do the things we do on Capitol Hill for our soldiers, for their families, without a strong membership. So if you're not a member, please do visit our membership booth in the South Hall foyer and sign up as soon as you can. And we thank you for your continued support. Wi-Fi internet access is available throughout the building. To access Wi-Fi on your personal device, please select AUSA Global Force and simply press Connect. If you haven't already done so, make sure you download the AUSA mobile app, which will get you the latest information on what's going on here at this symposium, and there's a lot going on. The AUSA mobile app can be downloaded on Apple and Samsung devices. I would especially like to thank all the companies that are exhibiting here with us. They're an integral part of the learning process and professional development. You don't know what you don't know. So I urge you to visit our exhibiting companies and find out what they're doing to continue to make our Army the greatest Army in the world. Lunch is cash and carry, and it's available in the Probst Arena right across the way here. I will ask at this point to ensure that your mobile devices are silenced, and it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you General Carter F. Ham.
Well, thanks, Michael, and good morning to all, and welcome back to Huntsville, which we're very excited to be here. This is, we think, Michael, right? This is number 6 here in Huntsville, and we're thrilled to be here. As I was thinking about the Global Force Symposium for 2019, and particularly all the challenges that the Army has faced, that our armed forces have faced, I found a study that I thought might be interesting, and I'll share a part of it with you. And it's a study that answers the question simply of, why do we need an Army? Why do we need an Army? At no other time in our history has there been such widespread confusion about the size, role, cost, and effectiveness of our armed forces. With so many conflicting pressures, it is little wonder that we tend to lose sight of some of the fundamentals of a realistic defense force, an understanding of which can help us to more intelligent decisions across the whole spectrum of defense requirements. During this period of active negotiations and a renewed search for a new international order, it is particularly appropriate to examine the basics of our military structure. We have to assure ourselves as a nation that the military posture of the United States really does provide the capability to support U.S. national policy in all situations against all reasonable threats. We need to be sure that our military program provides for forces and measures that provide a credible, integrated, and realistic deterrent to war, and, if necessary, to wage war in such a manner as to achieve our national objectives. I think that pretty concisely wraps up where we are. That report was an AUSA report from September of 1973. Kind of reminds us sometimes that while we think some of these problems are new, perhaps some of them aren't all that new. So we find ourselves once again here in Huntsville, and happy to be here for the 2019 AUSA Global Force Symposium and Exposition. Again, 6th time here. The relationship that your association has crafted with the United States Army and the Redstone Huntsville community over the past several years truly has been remarkable, and it's a win-win for the Army, for our association members, for our industry partners, and we are really happy to be back here in Huntsville. This symposium is intended to align with the annual President's budget submission, and this year is no exception. Today, as many of you know, the Secretary of the Army, Esper, and Chief of Staff of the Army, General Milley, are appearing before the Congress in their posture hearings, and will do again so tomorrow in the House. With the budget release earlier this month, we have an opportunity this week to better understand where the Army is headed and what the resourcing picture is going to look like. And throughout these discussions, what we really need is for the President and the Congress to maintain momentum and pass the fiscal year 20 defense authorizations and appropriations bills on time, as they did last year. This year's budget request will go a long way toward meeting the Army's strategic objectives for maintaining training and readiness, while simultaneously giving a big boost to the vital force modernization priorities that Secretary Esper and General Milley have outlined. This will give us a lot to talk about this week, and it's why we have selected, along with the Army, the theme of this year's symposium, Readiness for Multi-Domain Operations. Before we get started in earnest this morning, let's thank a couple of folks and organizations that have made this week very possible. The support that we receive here in Huntsville and in the surrounding communities truly has been overwhelming, and we genuinely appreciate the enthusiasm we've seen across this community, this great Army community. The City of Huntsville, the Huntsville Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Von Braun Center, the local Chamber of Commerce, they give us terrific support again, and we're very, very grateful for that. A special shout out to our local AUSA Redstone Huntsville chapter led by Sam Torrey, which has provided us with invaluable assistance and support. You'll see many of them, you did see many of them this morning at registration, and it's no wonder that the Redstone Huntsville chapter is a perennial best chapter candidate and frequent winner, thanks to the chapter for all your enthusiastic support. Absolutely right. This agenda that we'll go through over the next couple of days has been crafted and would not be possible without the close collaboration with the Army's senior leadership, with Secretary Esper, Undersecretary of the Army Ryan McCarthy, the Chief of Staff, the Vice Chief of Staff, Sergeant Major of the Army Dan Daly, and I would say also this group of senior Army leaders seated across the front row, each of whom you'll hear from throughout the day today. A special shout out to General Gus Perna, Commander of Army Materiel Command, and the host once again. General Perna, on behalf of all of us, thanks for all that you personally and all that your team have done this year and all the preceding years to make Global Force such a great success. Thank you, Gus. General Brown is here from U.S. Army Pacific, General Murray, Army Futures Command, and the Army's newest four-star, General Mike Garrett, United States Army Forces Command. We're glad to have you. The cross-functional team directors will all be here. You'll have an opportunity to engage with them. The Army is here, and they're here for you, and we're very thankful for that. I'd like to, again, a special welcome to our allies and partners from other nations. The Army recognizes, and you all have read in the National Defense Strategy, the vital importance of sustaining alliances and partnerships, and we are thankful that all of you have joined us here in Huntsville, and it helps us in immeasurable ways. Thank you very much for your presence to be here. I would encourage you while you are here, as Michael Scanlan said, to take advantage of the time on the exhibition floor and see all that the industries are doing to support this great Army. We've allocated plenty of time for you to do that so that you're not conflicted with being in here in the professional development forum and on the exhibit floor. And just a reminder, I think those of you who have been here before know there are 3 areas to visit. There's the East Hall, which is the closest to here. That's an important area for you to visit. There's an outside area, and then there's the main exhibit hall in South Hall. Don't miss any of them. And again, we've allocated plenty of time for you to do that. You'll see some great initiatives surrounding the main agenda. There's an ROTC panel that will precede the ROTC luncheon on Thursday. There's a young professionals reception It's not age limited. It's if you're young in mind and heart, you're welcome to do that. A non-commissioned officer brown bag lunch for our senior enlisted leaders, a civilian career programs, a family forum, and this year the always popular Innovators Corner and Warrior Center, or Warrior Corner venues. I think we have the best lineup for the Innovators Corner and the Warriors Corner that we have had in many, many years. We encourage you to visit those as well. We'll take an opportunity tomorrow to formally recognize the Army's 3 outstanding soldier athletes who have distinguished themselves in the areas of athletic competition. Again, and one of them, I believe, has joined us this morning, the Army Male Athlete of the Year, Staff Sergeant Michael Melendez-Rivera. Sergeant Melendez-Rivera, I think you're here. Where are you? There he is. Okay. From the 19th Special Forces Group, Utah Army National Guard. Congratulations, and we'll look forward to a great event tomorrow. So let's get this thing started. And who better to get us kicked off on a week with a focus on readiness and modernization than the 33rd Undersecretary of the Army. The Honorable Ryan McCarthy was unanimously confirmed. Unanimously confirmed. Nothing in Washington happens unanimously, all right? He was unanimously confirmed by the Senate as the 33rd Undersecretary of the Army. As many of you know, he served a fairly lengthy stint as the acting Secretary of the Army, a great friend of our association. He's a graduate of the Virginia Military Institute. He's a combat veteran, having served with the 75th Ranger Regiment in combat. He served, some would say, in a different kind of combat with then Colonel Milley in Secretary Gates' office. He has served in industry. He's been a tremendous leader and a point man for many of the Army's initiatives over the past several years. He is a great soldier for life. Please welcome the 33rd Undersecretary of the Army, the Honorable Ryan McCarthy.
Thank you for having me. General Ham, thank you for your gracious comments. General Ham has been a wonderful teammate to me, really a friend and mentor as I've assumed this role, and I'm very grateful for all that he's done for me personally, but also the leadership at AUSA. We only have 21 months to go, so hang in there, brother. Thank you for the city of Huntsville, the great state of Alabama, for hosting us for the next couple of days, and for all the work that the AMC team does to support this event, as we don't ask you all to do enough. We want you to run this conference with you, with AUSA. We are 2 weeks removed from the budget drop, $182.3 billion. I was texting the chief and the secretary as they were getting in the trucks, heading up to Capitol Hill. They're about to testify in front of the Senate Armed Services Committee, so they're probably sitting in a hold room right now. And I'm trying to withhold my jubilation that I am not sitting there with them and that I'm here with you. So really, really great to be here. And I'd be remiss not to say, Miss Audra, you put tears in my eyes. That was remarkable. Thank you. So I'm in a really good mood because I'm in Alabama and not on Capitol Hill right now. But I'm going to talk a lot about where we've been for the last 2 years and where we're trying to take the Army in the future. A lot of moves that have been made, a lot of decisions, and now we have to execute. So if you look back when Secretary Mattis assumed the helm in the department, he really wanted to push hard to restore readiness and rebalance the department, which at that point had been in its about 16th year of combat operations in the Middle East. And there were 4 fundamentals behind the National Defense Strategy that he published, and that was nuclear posture, great power competition, irregular warfare, and partnership capacity. And he was really saying you got to do all of it, but the real canary in the coal mine was General Milley. The chief had one of the bravest testimonies that I've probably seen in my lifetime of how he had said that readiness was getting to a point where we're heading into a crisis point, and that we needed to restore funding and put a greater focus and emphasis on that, because only 2 of our brigade combat teams were at the highest level of readiness. And along with that focus and the uplift of the FY 18-19 budget deal, today we're about north of 25. at the highest level of readiness. Over almost half of our brigade combat teams are there today. Now, he didn't do it alone. He had Abe Abrams and Laura Richardson, Sergeant Major Grinston, because as much of it was funding as it was laser focus on what needed to be done. And when you're 60% of combatant commanders' requirements worldwide, that is remarkable. And I'd be remiss not to say it as well. I think Laura Richardson here somewhere, I can't see her right now, there she is, straddled 2 jobs for 5 months, leading one of the toughest commands in the Army. So needless to say, thank you, Laura, for all you did. During a very consequential time, obviously, and did a remarkable job. And there's more for her to do, but I can't talk about it because nominations are moving slowly through the system. But she's probably going to get another big job here soon. So more for her to do, needless to say. So we knew that readiness and modernization were going to be initiatives, if you will, that had to have a greater emphasis and focus and changes. So with readiness, the FY 18-19 budget deal that was enacted gave us a lot of funding, and we had a lot of focus. And as you increase the number of combat training center rotations and home station training, the force is running hard, but we're getting them the resources they need and trying to buy them the time to do what they need to do and do best. But one of the greatest challenges for us was in modernization. We had to look at the way we're organized, the choices that we were going to make in investments, and ultimately look at our operating model. So we sat down as a leadership team in the fall of 2017, locked in against 6 modernization priorities: long-range precision fires, next-generation combat vehicle, future vertical lift, the network, integrated air and missile defense, soldier lethality, and complementary efforts of synthetic training environment and assured position navigation and timing. There's about 30 systems that fall within those 6 priorities. But we knew we had to lock against a hard prioritization because at best, in the out years, we're looking at flat or declining fiscal environments. So we needed a one to end. Put that in place. General McConville leads the process to select some of the best and brightest to bring requirements leaders to the table to work side by side with acquisition leaders and develop cross-functional teams. Bring all of the disparate pieces of modernization together in a pilot program to manage these investment priorities. We met as a team and moved $990 million in S&T against these 6 priorities so that in the 18-19 deal, we could prime the pump. It's because we knew in the out years we would have to make choices to finance our ambition, but we had to get started immediately. Make all of these choices, put together a task force to organize a set of courses of action to look at how the Army would organize itself in the future. And ultimately, by the July timeframe, make the announcement to establish a 4-star headquarters that will fuse all the stakeholders for the modernization enterprise all under one roof. And put a flag in the ground in Austin, Texas, and made General Mike Murray the Chief Investment Officer of the U.S. Army. So now you have a requirements leader at the table sitting side by side with Dr. Jetty, the acquisition leader of the Army. So we can bring requirements and acquisition together, fusing all of that energy into one place. And the results speak for themselves. Requirements definition has been taking 5 to 7 years. We're getting it down to 18 months or less. Bringing the folks together as a team, the collaboration and the energy that's been brought forward is ultimately how we're going to be able to get through this difficult time. But just organizing against a problem and creating processes is one way to get after the problem, but ultimately you have to think about how you're going to finance it. Because in a flat or declining fiscal environment, you're going to have to do what you must. So as a leadership team, we sat down and said, how are we going to look at this problem set over the next 5 years to ensure that we can finance our ambition? We delivered a modernization strategy to Congress that said, here's 1 to 6, here's what we think it's going to cost. And we told everybody it would take north of $20 billion to finance it. This was in the spring of 2018. It was largely material, and what you'll see in this following year will be an adjustment of how we'll add the operating model as well as material in the future. And as we work our way across the FYDP, Future Years Defense Plan, all the pieces start to come together. But ultimately, the choices that had to be made were, what do you want now or what do you want in the future? Hard prioritization, one to end. And the Army senior leadership sat down for the entire spring and summer and reviewed every program in the budget, all $182.3 billion worth. And we had to make choices. And we found about $30 billion to align across the FIDP in its entirety for 20 to 24 program. $22 billion of which were pure cuts and terminations, about 186 total. The other $8 billion were cost efficiencies, reducing the appetite or the inflationary growth associated with year-over-year spending. An example would be reducing end strength to 2,000 year-over-year, effective immediately in 2019. Bringing back billions of dollars of buying power to the department so that we could finance our agenda. Very difficult choices. Symbolic choices in some case, departing from some signature systems of the Big Five, we call the Big Five. But we knew that we had to make these choices now because we have an opportunity where you're flush with cash, and that these systems in many cases are 40 years old. And you find yourself in a tight window that you can go through, and you can pull some of these systems through and add to our formations here in the very near future. That's not to say this will not be without folks picking at it and conducting a lot of oversight, which I think they're probably going through right about now. I drew the long straw this week. But the choices that were made were necessary. Now the question is how we execute. What will add confidence for folks is, do you have the threat identified? Our near-peer competitors are China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And the investment choices that General Murray's is making are going to be the best in breed to deal against those threats. The operating concept, which you're going to hear a lot about over the next day or two, multi-domain operations. We're going to have to change the way we are organized as a force. It will change our force structure in the future. And the work that I joke about this, but I'm very serious as well. There are about 5 or 6 officers in the Army that are really going to drive this for us. Eric Wesley, Jimmy Richardson, Paul Ostrowski, Charlie Flynn, Mike Lundy. They have to bring the entire .mil PF continuum together so that all these signature systems that Murray's investing against, how are you going to enable them? The Big 5 weapon systems were really the Big 64 because you had HEMTs and HETs and all kinds of other capabilities that enabled the formation. That all came in trail as they made those choices back in the 70s and 80s. The difference is now we're going to have to do it a lot faster because the threat continuum is moving faster than it ever has at a breathtaking pace. So those 5 or 6 folks I mentioned, they're going to have to help lead us through this process. And in time, it'll start to get more clear as we work our way across this FIDP and start bringing these tranches of capability in to being experimented and prototyping, which actually start as early as this Thursday. The Integrated Visual Augmentation System, which is essentially, it's actually more greater than a pair of night vision goggles. This is my prop that I always use when I'm in audiences. It's a pair of goggles where you can look at them and have day and night sight. We put an interface in there where you bring thermal capabilities, but also bring performance data, synthetic training. So the same pair of kit that you wear in practicing, you're going to take to war. And now the leaders conducted after-action reviews when a soldier practices room clearing. What was their marksmanship, their heart rate, to improve performance for soldiers. And how fitting that this is one of the first capabilities we're going to bring through the system because we're a people business. We're going to be testing the PRISM this fall, precision strike missile, ATACMS replacement. All this fall, this summer and fall, you're going to see capabilities starting to being tested. Because as Secretary Esper loves to put it, we're going to fly it before we buy it. We put billions of dollars in prototyping so that we can get out there and we put operators' hands on the weapon systems so we can learn as much as we can and make the right investment decisions. There's a lot of energy behind this effort, but it's going to take partnerships with industry to help us get through this. For those that are willing to invest and come along with us, there's $57 billion worth of opportunity in the 5 years defense plan. That's not without risk, but it has to be done. And I'd love to have a conversation with all of you over the course of the next 2 days. These are exciting times for us in the Army. We need all the help we can get because the world is changing at a pace that we've never seen in our lifetimes. So, great opportunity for me to be here. I saw where's Mr. Scanlan? He's walking around with his cards, so I thought that was my cue that I had to stop talking. Are you going to ask me some questions? I can't see you. Where is he? Okay, fire away. You're going to have to sound off there, Ranger. I can barely hear you. You can borrow mine. I have a young daughter, so I go to bed. What keeps me awake at night? What I mentioned before, those 5 or 6 general officers I mentioned that are going to have to really come together. The dot mill PF continuum, so exquisitely designed, is why we have performed under the most extraordinary conditions in the history of the Republic, 17 straight years of combat operations, and our units still are ready and they're still performing under constant duress. And so when you're making these big investments that General Murray's leading with Dr. Jetty, some of them are going to land in this FIDIP, 22, 23. But how do you enable them? Sustainment. General Pernod, we talked about this at dinner last night. We're going to be the dog that catches the mail truck in the out years, and then what are you going to do? And you got to be able to have high OR rates. It's got to keep feeding the beast so that it can perform. So when I talked about those general officers, they have to really be tightly coupled to bring all the pieces together. The other services have had similar challenges when they develop exquisite weapon systems and they bring them into their formations. They got to be able to talk to each other, first of all. So you can bring that combined arms capability to play and have maximum compounded interest when you're engaged with the enemy. So those officers I mentioned, I'm going to be investing an enormous amount of my time to help them get through this process, get them the resources they need, the guidance that they need to get through these difficult wickets. So that would probably be it. We've made very sound investment choices. They have great leaders in all these different jobs, but it's just being able to synchronize all that in the future is really going to be the master's degree level work that we're going to have to do.
Sir, I'm back. At a time when allies and partners are so crucial to U.S. defense, how do you see them interfacing with the U.S. Army's modernization priorities?
So that's a conversation we've been having pretty consistently lately is more energy from Army senior leadership on foreign military sales. So we're all signing up to work that problem set with other countries. One of the things we know General Murray's thinking through is how he's going to relate with his counterparts. Army Futures Command's, we're about 7 or 8 months into it. He's not even FOC yet, but once he gets on the backside FOC, I know he's going to start working with the partners more closely. But really, foreign military sales here in the interim is something I think you'll see Dr. Esper and the Chief take a lot of leadership on, and we're going to start pushing that very hard.
Please explain how the Army is reducing risk and ensuring the best combat capability with the OMFV when many requirements are mutually exclusive and developmental. Achieving such tasks seems impossible in the current schedule and under the current schedule and resources.
I don't know if I'm the best guy to answer that question. Murray's sitting right there, but looking for a lifeline here. What's that TV show? I would defer to General Murray and the cross-functional team. That's a level of detail that I've not been able to work.
Please expand upon the challenges and solutions of improving equipment readiness while achieving the modernization objectives through the FIDIP.
So that's a delicate balance. One of the things that Dr. Esper and the Chief have established is an additional target of a reduction of savings of $10 billion across the 21 to 25 FIDIP. So we're going to continue the reform efforts that we've been very successful on over the last 2 years and find additional funding in the out years to be able to fund issues just like that.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have the under right here. Surely there's something you'd like to ask him.
Coffee's kicking in. It'll take a minute.
Yeah. Here we go.
Hey, sir, could you comment on the fact that you've got modernization going at an accelerated pace, but what is your assessment on procurement and the vehicles and the processes in which you're trying to have the outcomes of that modernization process? From a vendor point of view, it seems like the traditional way of procurement is slow, complex, and often not value-oriented for the client.
You're being polite. So I'm actually encouraged. I think Dr. Jetty has shown a lot of leadership here. We have 8 programs where we're using the OTA authority. We're being very judicious, maybe a little conservative from that standpoint, because about a year ago in the department, there was a OTA that another entity in the Department of Defense was going to use that they got in a whole bunch of trouble in the way they set it up and had a protest, and it got very messy. And the committees of jurisdiction came down on us hard, and they were like, you need to be more judicious with this. So we have 8 programs that are under OTAs, which is actually more than any of the other services. And I'm about to look at Jeff White for a thumbs up or down here, right? Boom, okay. So we have 8 programs where we're using OTA authority. And a couple of them are under the signature systems that General Murray's driving. So, part of Washington is you got to get a first down, or they're going to take the ball away. So we got to show that we can do it well, and then we can open up the aperture and do more of them, which has the intention of Dr. Esper and the chief really want to do that, but we got to put some points on the board.
Sir, how does artificial intelligence, autonomy, and robotics fit into the CFTs?
So we have an artificial intelligence task force where we are tightly coupled with some very prestigious research universities around the country, and it actually falls under General Murray and Futures Command because a lot of artificial intelligence is we need to be able to better understand its capabilities and condition the force, very similar to what the Air Force went through with Predator drones. How do you bring this capability and how do you utilize it? A lot of it is what's in between the ears, so we got to teach people about this capability. We have to obviously get smarter on it. We have to bring the best and brightest minds in the country to help us research some very specific projects to see how you could use those applications into a combat system. We've been very methodical in how we've gone about this process, but I think you're going to hear a lot more about that as we head into the fall.
Sir, will AFC be limited to prioritization and requirements, or will their mission set eventually include PEOs and the acquisition functions?
So Dr. Esper and the chief instituted this effort called Night Court back in the spring and summer. The Army staff has a sense of humor, so they had to find a way to brand it. And we spent about 100 hours or so in a conference room, and we went through all these programs. But to really institutionalize this behavior where you bring that level of rigor into your investments, we knew the leadership, had to look at how do you really put the systems in place and empower the leadership to drive it. So we've paired up the commanders with assistant secretaries, and they drive the investment portfolios, manning, training, equipment. So in this case with General Murray, he and Dr. Jetty have to make a very convincing case. If they want 31 or 35 or 25 systems, they have to come forward with the investment or divestiture choices because you only have just so much money. We started that process about 2 months ago, and as we head into the summer, it'll continue to mature, but we're off to a very good start. And General Murray and Dr. Jetty put together a very compelling case, and we're going through each of those line items as we head towards delivering the 21 POM to OSD this summer. There he is. I knew I couldn't get through this without Sydney.
one part of Washington at least followed you here, sir, but the restraining order is, I'm within that bound, so it's good.
Yeah.
Sidney Friedberg, Breaking Defense, for all of you who may not be steeped in Washington. Let me ask, multi-domain is inherently a joint thing. The service secretaries are now getting together with their breakfast meetings that terrify their staffs.
Me too.
You as well. But where do we make the hard choices collectively? Is there some mechanism that can drive people to say, okay, everybody's building hypersonics, for example. Mm-hmm. Is there one way for someone to say, okay, you take the lead on this, you don't do so as much as this? A forcing function, the same kind of you've made in the Army across the joint force?
Well, hypersonics, because you wrote about it, we have a joint MOA with the other services, and we are actually going to share data on the tests. We're going to look at combined buys to get economy of scale on material. So I think we're doing pretty well with hypersonics. With respect to the multi-domain choices, the department's looking very hard at joint analysis wargaming. And we'll try to find the right venues between the DMAG and the ops steps and the tank. And I know we're getting way into Washington here for all of our Alabama hosts, but what that means is basically the requirements side, the warfighters, operations deputies, they all work for the chiefs. They all meet in a venue and they talk about how you're going to conduct a fight. Whereas myself and General McCarthy, who represent the Army and a more business side, will meet and figure out how you're going to finance and the choices. So there's these venues they have in the Pentagon, and we work through that in the spring and summer and fall to make the collective choices. That will be challenging. It will require a tremendous amount of leadership, Sidney. You're going to need the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman, Vice Chairman, DepSecDef are going to have to get in there to make help drive those choices. Because to your point, we all go to war differently. But then it'll be a lot of combatant commander feedback of what are the capabilities they need to shape their theaters, and then, if necessary, conduct combat operations and win. We're the pathfinders in the Army, of course. If you look at the Air Force and the Navy, they're reaching out to General Murray, trying to get an understanding of how the Army came to this point, because there are challenges that all the services have with investment choices. The Navy has submarines, they have aircraft carriers and airplanes, and how does ultimately those choices get made? I don't know, I didn't work in the Navy, but I know that they can come and learn to see how we're doing it, because what I believe, very strongly is how wonderful this system is, because we make all of our choices about the formation. The choice is the strengthening the formation, because we fight as a combined arms team.
There has been little discussion in the public on the Budget Control Act or sequestration. Yeah. Can you share your thoughts on how the Army will handle this issue when it surfaces in public?
Yeah, we are surfaced for sure. The budget's out, and because of the Budget Control Act, which a law was passed 10 years ago, the last time I was in government, now this is coming to a head where if you don't construct a deal to reduce the deficits that we face, that ultimately you will contract and then be enacted, and then you could lose in the upwards of $100 billion of buying power, and you'll get hit with these budgetary caps. Now, the department put forward a proposal that it needed to meet national objectives. So in the Army, we said, we're going to ask for what we need. We're not going to look at a budgetary cap. So if you look at the way the Army presented its budget 2 weeks ago, we have a base budget, we have overseas contingency operations, and then we have OCO to base. This is all a lot of Washington gobbledygook, but it was basically, we had to lay it out in such a way to show legally what was in the base and then what would be over and above. Now, we need all of it, but it's because of the way the law was written, you have to make all of this visible and transparent to the Congress. Now, what's going to happen is the executive branch and the Congress are going to have this debate in the spring and the summer and into the fall, and you're either going to have to raise the budgetary caps or you're going to have to make very, very hard choices. I believe right now, I think that the incentives, this is my opinion, the incentives are there for a deal. That is not to say that will not be very difficult and a lot of back and forth to the fall, but it's in no one's interest, in either of the political parties in the executive or legislative branches, to have the Budget Control Act be enacted. The world is too complex and dangerous for us not to have the budget that we need, because we have a strategy of how to deal with this. It requires additional funding. The choices we made were a strategy, not a budget. So the line the Department of Defense says is we need the funding we requested. So I think it's going to be a long, hot summer.
Is soldier lethality and close combat lethality task force emphasis being lost with the media focus on fires and vehicles?
No, I think the soldier lethality and the synthetic training team has worked very well with the close combat study. The close combat study was a Secretary Mattis initiative, but they folded in very nicely. If you look at the final report that came out last fall to Secretary Mattis, or update, whatever they called it, most of the initiatives that his close combat study had came from the soldier lethality and synthetic training environment team. And I think she actually have the numbers over there, but a massive investment across the FIDIP for the soldier lethality and synthetic training team, CFTs. And I believe it'd be one of the first signature systems that we pull through that knothole and we field to the units.
Do you believe improving and expanding the Department of Defense's strategic lift capabilities will receive focused effort from Army leadership, as will the combat platforms being developed?
When we've made these choices, when General Murray brings them forward on the requirements on these weapon systems, weight is always one of the key considerations. You got to be able to get them on C-17, C-5s to move them, force projection. But I'm not very clear about where the Air Force's investment choices are with respect to strategic lift. But we need our systems lighter and faster.
Are there any acquisition insights or commentary that you can share regarding programs here at Redstone, namely PEO missiles and space, PEO acquisition, et cetera?
I spent the whole day out here. I saw the IBCS program, went over to PEO Aviation, had a discussion with the whole team. They have all signature capabilities that we're making great investments in. Redstone is a crown jewel for the Army, and we are making a lot of investments, a lot of great work being done here. The hypersonics team's down here. I think we got, two or three CFTs? Two CFTs. So our investment priorities are housed here. AMC headquarters. This is an incredibly important place for the Army.
Last question, sir. Are there milestones? Milestone success goals for the Futures Command? 1 year, 3 year, 5 year?
That guy right there.
Are there milestones?
I don't want to put any expectations on a room full of people. We're very excited about the pace that they're on. The cross-functional teams are doing very well with their engagements with Congress and industry. They've been able to move requirements documents at a pace we've not seen through the department. I think we're working very well with between the acquisition requirements community. A lot of what the next step of what you'll see is what the command group in Austin are working on. Multi-domain operations. They published 1.5 last fall. I think you'll see the modernization strategy have much more sophistication. This 2.0, which will basically be the update from the spring of 2018, which was largely materiel. This time around, you'll see the whole .mlpf continuum on top of that. So that's a lot of the Eric Wesley's leadership. And so I think we're excited about the work that's being done. Going forward, it's going to be how this becomes really the center of gravity for us for modernization efforts. And I think by the fall, we'll see a lot more.
Thank you so much, Mr.
Thanks,
Secretary.
everybody.
How about a round of applause for Secretary McCarthy?
guidance. You don't ever stop getting mentored. But thanks, Mr. Secretary. I think in addition to the Congress, the Senate unanimously confirming it, I think we would unanimously confirm we are pleased that you are our Undersecretary. Thank you very much for all that you've done for soldiers and their families. Secretary McCarthy asked me to pass on a bit of overnight news that some of you probably saw and some of you probably didn't. Last night, before the Senate Armed Services Committee, a nomination was delivered by the President of the United States to the Senate, nominating General James McConville to be the 40th Chief of Staff of the United States Army. That is great news for General McConville and his family. It's even better news for the United States Army and for the United States of America. A great leader, a great soldier, and we look forward to hopefully a speedy confirmation process, and we will all welcome him as the 40th Chief of Staff.